Use a paper filter, use a lower ratio, use a finer grind. There's no shortage of good advice out there, but what nobody tells you is what actually makes the difference in your cup and how to make it all work in your favor. One thing that drives people away from French press is the fines, especially at the end of the cup. For that, some solutions were developed. James Hoffmann has this technique of breaking and skimming the crust, then letting it rest for a few minutes to decant the particles. Another option is using the layer of coffee grounds itself to sieve out the fines. And a third option, a paper filter placed under the plunger's screen. The paper filter is the best option, but it doesn't just catch grit. It also pulls out some of the oils that, in theory, give the French press its body, the thick, silky mouthfeel that separates it from a pour-over in the first place. A metal mesh doesn't filter the oils. Since I wanted the body and texture, but not the microfines, I tried to find the middle ground. I started with a cotton flannel, the kind of fabric used in a nail drip brewer, compared to the same recipe with a paper filter, using Lance Hedrick's recipe. It was not a game changer. It had a bit more body, but nothing I would notice except in a head-to-head test. A second attempt was cheesecloth, with a much more open weave than the flannel. This time, there were visibly more fines settled at the bottom of the cup, but still, next to the paper filter version, the difference in flavor stayed small. Then, I took the filter out of the equation entirely. I pulled the lid off the plunger, pressed the grounds down, let it sit for 5 minutes to settle, and drew the coffee out from the top with a syringe instead of pouring it, so I wouldn't disturb the sediment on the way out. If any method was going to give me maximum body, this was it. But the gap was still small, despite seeing an oilier and more turbid beverage. I'm not a Q grader, I'm not a super taster, and some of you may notice the difference more than I did in the 3 experiments. But for me, an average coffee enthusiast, it wasn't a step change, which was kind of disappointing. So here's the first real finding. The paper filter is worth using. It gets rid of the grit, it barely touches the flavor, and it lets you drink in 4 minutes instead of the 10 in Hoffmann's method. But there's a noticeable difference in the cup when you compare the paper filter recipe against Hoffmann's recipe. If the paper filter isn't the main reason, what is it then? So I started testing the variables. First, water contact time. I shortened Hoffmann's recipe to 4 minutes, which means I broke and skimmed the crust but plunged right away instead of waiting. For my surprise, not a huge difference in flavor, but of course there were more fines at the bottom of the cup, and for me it's really unpleasant. Conclusion, water contact times matters more than the paper filter. Next, I tested different grind size. On this DU63, a new grinder that Gamery sent me and that I've been testing for a few weeks now, I tried the Lance's recipe at a full turn at the 75 and 50 marks. This time I noticed a clear difference. 75 was my preferred setting, and 50 was a bit bitter and over-extracted. However, my experience with AeroPress made me suspect that agitation could play a role as well. So, in my third experiment, after pouring, I stirred 30 times right away. At the 1 minute mark, I stirred again 15 times. Then every 30 seconds up to 3.5 minutes, another 15 stirs each round. And I finally plunged at the 4 minute mark. That single change shifted the cup more than the grind adjustment did. It makes sense once you think about what agitation is actually doing. In a French press, the water isn't moving past the grounds the way it does in a pour-over. It's just sitting there. Stirring is how you force fresh water back into contact with the coffee, and it's a lever you control directly with a spoon. But there was still another variable to test: ratio. Hoffmann uses an almost 1:17 ratio, Lance and Esther use 1:15, and Justin uses 1:14. We know how much ratio changed the cup in other brewing methods, and in general, I tend to prefer more diluted coffees for better clarity. In this case, I didn't believe a higher concentration would lead to more extraction, and I didn't know if I would miss the clarity that more diluted recipes tend to have. But I decided to test well outside the range anyway, 1 to 10, with all the other variables unchanged. The cup came out more concentrated as expected, but here's a surprise. It was also more juicier, more pleasant, and not bitter at all. That was my favorite version of French press I've made through this whole test, and it's a ratio none of those recipes get anywhere near. So my best recipe adjusted to my taste using a Colombian light roast is 15 grams of coffee ground similar to a V60 recipe, around 90 clicks on my K6 or the 75 mark on my GU63, 150 grams of boiling water, stir 30 times right after adding the water, put a paper filter at the bottom of the plunger, at the 4-minute mark, slowly press the plunger down and enjoy it. I'm not saying it's better or worse, or that this is the ultimate French press recipe. What I wanted to tell you is to explore, to allow yourself to discover what works best for each specific coffee for you. In this test with this coffee, a lightly roasted Colombian, 1 to 10 worked way better for me. It was a great surprise. In another test, using an Ethiopian, also light roast, I preferred 1 to 12. If you've only ever brewed inside the 1 to 14 to 1 to 17 range, because that's the number you see everywhere, try different ratios. Taste for yourself. And if you tried different grind settings, agitation, or ratio, share with us in the comments what you noticed. So these tests confirmed a few very interesting hypotheses. I do agree with those who say that French press is more forgiving. Across all these tests, small changes in the parameters didn't make a significant difference in the cup. To me, that means the method is very tolerant, good for a relaxed moment when you're not trying to tweak every variable to the highest precision or when you just woke up. It's the opposite of espresso in that way. In today's test, grinding a bit finer worked better for me, and a paper filter is great for filtering out the fines I personally don't like, with little to no impact on flavor. But body, sweetness, and concentration come from water contact time, grind size, agitation, and ratio. And none of these 4 has one correct setting. Each one just pushes your cup in one direction. If your coffee tastes bitter, lower the water contact time, grind coarser, and agitate less. If it tastes sour, thin, or tea-like, increase the immersion time, grind finer, and agitate more. Set your ratio to how concentrated you actually like your coffee, not to whatever number a recipe hands you. Taste your own cup, figure out which direction it needs to move, and go there. And don't forget that the biggest impact on the quality of your cup, especially in French press, is the coffee and the water. Buy good coffee and use soft water. If you want to know more about water, I have an intro video here, and to go down the rabbit hole of water, Asser from the Coffee Chronicler has a great course on the topic. I bought it about a year ago, and it's a great compilation of everything a beginner needs to know about water. A good grinder is also important, but for French press, it doesn't need to be the top notch. You can start with a €35 hand grinder like the P2, but I'll put some links for other good and affordable grinders that I've reviewed in the description. A scale is important, of course, but it doesn't need to be an expensive one. Even a kitchen scale and your phone's stopwatch is sufficient, but I'll leave the link for my video about scales in case you have any doubts. One more thing I wanted to mention, I was looking for a French press to buy, and I was a bit bored with the same designs you always see on the market. Then I found this one from Marti, a small business in Spain. It's compact, it goes in the microwave if you want to heat and froth milk. It's dishwasher safe. The size is perfect for me, 350 ml. It does get a bit hotter than I would like on this silicone sleeve, but it's acceptable. However, one review on Amazon caught my attention, mentioning that the glass is quite thin. Then I reached out to Marti to ask about the glass thickness. They said it's the regular borosilicate glass in standard thickness, and after knowing the channel, they ended up kindly gifting me this unit. So this isn't a sponsored review. They had no say in my opinions, and this isn't even a review, but if you also like supporting small local businesses, this is a nice product with a different design, link in the description. And if you want to support my channel, you can become a member or just like, subscribe, hype, or share my videos. It all helps me make more and better content. Thanks for watching, and ciao!